Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fascinating Facts, our 6-week journey exploring the myths and mysteries of Judaism. Today we will be doing lesson 2, which is titled Sunrise, Sunset, and we will be exploring the Jewish life cycle. I want to say, well, first of all, I want to say a big thank you. Today's lesson is generously co-sponsored by Marilyn Kirshen, Jeff Anson, and Leticia Reyes. A big yasher koach to them. If you would like to sponsor next week's lesson, please reach out to me and let me know. Now, I want to start off by saying a disclaimer that I think I mentioned to many of you while I was marketing the course, but probably applies most to this lesson, and that is the 70-30 rule. I think that many of you, as we discuss this course, because it's a course that's just fascinating facts, it's just facts from all over Judaism, so there's a good chance that you're going to know some of the information. And the percentage I give most of you is that I would assume that most of you will be familiar with 30% of the information that we will be mentioning throughout the course, and 70% of it will be new stuff that you'll learn as we go through it. Particularly with regards to this lesson, I have a feeling that much of it is going to be stuff you're familiar with. But please be with me because there are a lot of things that people are not aware of or that there are myths about, and we'll do some myth busting as well today. So bear with me. I think you will enjoy that. As usual, we will open up our lesson with a video teaser. This one is such a cool place. It's kind of like an optical illusion, if you will. So please turn your attention to the video screens for the video that opens today's lesson. Let me just make sure it's optimized for video. There we go. So today we are going to be discussing the life cycle, and I'd like to open up with probably the most important part of the life cycle, and that is why. Why? Whenever you want to understand something in life, it's always best to ask the question why, and if somebody gives you an answer, you can ask the question why again, and the more we understand about why we do things, the more we glean into what it is we're actually doing, and why we might be doing specific details when it comes to those things. For example, we all know that we celebrate happy occasions all the time, right? I don't know. Think of the last one you were at, somebody's birthday celebration, maybe a big birthday celebration, somebody's 60th birthday party, and you were there and you celebrated with them, etc. And some people celebrate these things as happy occasions. Some people avoid them at all costs. Nobody call me on my birthday. I feel old and I don't want to be reminded of it, right? And we have all these types of occasions throughout our lives. You've been to a bris, you've been to a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, you've been to a pidyon haben, you've been to a levaya, which is a Jewish funeral procession, right? A burial procession. And we tend to spend time commemorating these occasions. And I think that most often, most of us don't bother to ask the question why. It's just, what do you mean? They're celebrating a birth. Of course I'm there. Why? Why would you celebrate a birth? Why would you celebrate a birthday? Why would you be sad on the occasion of someone's passing? What are the significances when it comes to the wedding? Like, do all these things. Just get married. Two people get together, live your life together, share your finances. What's the big deal? Right? And that's the question I'd like to answer in general today. Why? Because otherwise it's like going to a Seder and nobody would do this. Nobody would go to a Seder and the host says, everybody take some vegetable now and dip it into salt water and eat it. And everybody asks why right away, right? That's immediately what you do. And I think that it behooves us when it comes to life cycle celebrations to understand why it is that we're doing what we're doing and what the significance is. So we're going to start off with a learning exercise on page 38. Below are some metaphors for life. All right? And I know this might go against some of your core principles in life to actually take out a pen and do this, but I'm going to encourage you to actually take out a pen and choose one of them to circle or to make a check by. There's a couple of metaphors here. You can add your own if you'd like to. What I'd like to hear is from one or two of you, which of these do you relate most with? Life is a roller coaster. Just got to ride it. My mom always said life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That's from the world famous Forrest Gump. Life is a great big canvas and you should throw all the paint you can on it. Life is like a coin. You can spend it in any way you wish, but you only spend it once. Life is just a bowl of cherries. A friend of mine shared with me, life is short, eat dessert first, right? So you can add your own if you'd like. Just some sort of metaphor for life. What is your favorite one? Dave, why don't you get us started? What's your favorite metaphor for life? It could be one of the ones here or one of your own.
Life is beautiful and be thankful for it.
Okay. That's not a metaphor. That's a statement.
Yeah.
That one says what it says right there. Okay. Fair enough. Elise, which one do you relate most with? What do you think?
Canvas, they're all the thing,
Why do you like that one the most?
You're doing things, you're living, you're not holding back.
I love it because it's active, because you're filling it with activity.
And creating and
Okay. Looks like Mark wants to go next. Go ahead, Mark.
Life is an unfolding story that I'm living.
Why do you like that one most?
Because I believe that God is writing the script and I'm living according to God's will.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I like that one. Reminds me of another one that I once heard, that life is like a book, right? And you can read through it and read all the chapters of your life, and then the next few pages are empty, right? So you get to write your story. Well, it might surprise you that the Talmud has a metaphor for life, and here it is. It's not a text. It's just part of learning activity 1. I don't know why they didn't really give it a text number. But Dave Barron, why don't you read it for us, please? It's on page 38 at the bottom. Does the Torah have a metaphor for life? It does indeed. Go for it.
On page 38?
Yep. I think, or page 39 it is? The second part of learning activity 1.
Okay. Does the Torah have a metaphor for life? It does indeed. Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, clever one, hurry and eat, hurry and drink, because the world from which we must depart is like a wedding feast.
All right. Hurry and eat, hurry and drink. Why do you think life is like a wedding? Why do you think life is like a wedding? Be prepared to share your answer. Life is like a wedding because I want to just get one thing out of the way. Our Torah literature, both in Tanakh as well as in the Talmud, in the written law and in the oral law, are full of warnings against living a hedonistic lifestyle. Okay, I'll quote one of them just for the sake of putting it out there. In Isaiah, in chapter 22, verse 13, Isaiah cautions the Jewish people, do not be like the people who have a cavalier attitude. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we will die. So to take this statement from Rav Yehuda, by the way, Rav Yehuda was called Shinina. He was called wise one or sharp one, clever one, as they translate here in the text. By his teacher Shmuel, Rav Yehuda was a student of both Rav and Shmuel, For those of you that took the Decoding the Talmud course, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And Rav Yehuda, this is Rav Yehuda bar Yecheskel, was his full name. He actually went on to found the next major Babylonian academy in the city of Pumbedisa. Anyways, just some fun fact about him. So I don't think that he was perhaps unaware of the fact that the Torah cautions us against living a hedonistic lifestyle. No, he was very, very much aware of that. But yet he is saying that it's like a wedding feast. Hurry up and eat, hurry up and drink, because you never know when the buffet is going to close. Right? I don't think this, in other words, I guess my point is, I don't think this is like the Torah's version of YOLO. You know YOLO? Just one block down from me, where Rabbi and Mrs. Hanoka live, right? So they live right off of Wilson, just one block away from Chabad. The street is called YOLO. It's a tiny little street. To the best of my knowledge, there's only one street. In other words, it doesn't continue going. It's not like, Green or Union or Colorado that go all the way down. It's just one street between Wilson and Mar Vista. It's called YOLO. And it's the scene of many short stops, because you have all these Gen Zers or millennials that come, they make a short, as soon as they notice the street sign, they make a quick short stop, they get out, they take a selfie, they keep going. What does YOLO stand for? It stands for you only live once. And it's an attitude that many people adopt, like, you only live once, eat some cake even though you're going to add some weight, right? You only live once, go skydiving or whatever it is, go jet skiing or whatever it is, right? I don't think that's what this is. So if we're trying to dig a little deeper, I think we can appreciate that that Shmuel is telling Rav Yehuda, Shinina, he is telling him, I want you to appreciate that from a spiritual perspective, life is like a wedding feast full of spiritual experiences for you to experience.
No, I disagree with that, though. I think that statement.
What do you mean?
To me, when you hurry something, you're not really taking in all there is to it. You're just getting through it.
So that's actually fascinating.
I can't agree with that.
It's fascinating that you say that. I'm not sure that chatayif means hurry. That's the way they translated it. I always heard chatayif as translated as grab and eat, grab and drink. In other words, the point is, there's a famous statement in Pirkei Avot. Mitzvah, I think it's from Pirkei Avot. I might be misquoting, but either way, the quote goes, Mitzvah haba liyadcha al tach mitzana. If a mitzvah opportunity comes your way, don't let it go sour. Right? You have people that get an opportunity to help somebody with a mitzvah. They say, just give me 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you might not be able to do that mitzvah. They might not need you anymore for that mitzvah. Right? I think that's the idea. The idea is
that makes more sense to me.
Right.
Because the word hurry is like, don't really appreciate what it is.
Yes.
Just get through it so you can get on.
So let's go with the other translation, which is grab. But I do want you to understand that either way, that's the intention that's meant. It's meant don't miss the opportunity. And in fact, Dave, since we have you anyways, why don't you continue reading for us text 1, which is from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe wants to address, why is it that it's compared to a wedding feast? He could have used any metaphor. A feast, grab and eat, grab and drink, because the buffet is going to close, right? Why a wedding feast? Why couldn't it have been anything else, right? So the Rebbe explains.
Man and woman are compared to a soul and a body. This world is like a wedding feast, because the fusion of the spiritual soul and the physical body, this world, is similar to the union of bride and groom.
In other words, just like when a bride and groom come together, it's two different human beings coming together. When a neshama and a soul, when a soul, a neshama, and a body, the guf, come together, they make up a complete human being. But actually, it's made up of two completely separate pieces, the body and the soul. And that's why we're saying the wedding feast of life, where the body and soul are joined together, which is only for a short period of time. Right? Starts with birth or conception, as we'll soon see, and then continues all the way till death, and then they're separated. They don't die. The body continues to exist in the ground. And when Mashiach comes, will come back. The soul continues to exist in the spiritual realms. They're just separated. But for a brief period here on earth, 70, 80, 90, 120 years, they're here and they're united. And that is a unique opportunity that we have during these years to grab as many mitzvah opportunities as we can to infuse the physical world with the spiritual. And this is why throughout our lives, and at every stage along the life cycle, along the cycle of life, we have blessings that we wish each other. And almost every single one of those blessings, the common blessing when someone has a baby is obviously the same mazel tov, which just is the Jewish equivalent of good luck, right, or congrats. But then we add sheyigadlo l'torah l'chuppah l'ma'asim tovim. You always say, may you merit to raise them to Torah, and to good deeds, and to wedding, and to all the wonderful things that are to come in their lives. At a bar mitzvah, we tell somebody you should grow up, you should be a chassid yirei shamayim and alamda, you should be pious, you should be God-fearing, you should be studious. At marriage, we say, binyan adiyada, I say that to atar bar mitzvahs. I'm just telling you the most common phrases that people use to wish people on these life cycle events, right? At a marriage, they'll say, "May you build an everlasting edifice on the foundation of Torah and mitzvos," right? And even when somebody passes away, we say, "Hamakom yinachem eschem, may Hashem comfort you." B'sol shara v'nitzim Yerushalayim. Again, a reference to Tzion and to Yerushalayim, to all of the mitzvos that there are associated with it. In other words, every one of these opportunities, at every single moment in life, there's a big moment coming up. The blessing that we as Jews wish each other is, how are you going to fill this? How are you going to grab the mitzvah opportunities that this life cycle event presents to you? So without further ado, we're going to go through the cycle of life one at a time. And with each one, we're going to try and provide some insight, but always with this foundation. The foundation of what is the meaning behind the life cycle event. It shouldn't just be, we get together, eat, drink, and be merry. It's not, you know, my favorite secular event to bash up on is New Year's Eve. What is New Year's Eve? Just an opportunity. People take it and they say it's an opportunity to eat, drink, and waste the night away and just have a good time, have more pleasure. That's what they do. They spend the whole New Year's Eve eating and drinking and getting drunk and whatever it is, right? At the stroke of midnight, doing whatever they do. In other words, all of it just in order to have more pleasure, because another year is going by, let's have more pleasure. So the Jewish view on life cycle events stands in stark contrast to that. Every single one of them is intended to be meaningful, intended to be another opportunity of chatei v'achel, chatei v'shti, grab and take another mitzvah. Don't let the mitzvah opportunity pass you by. Don't let life pass you by. It's all meant to be filled with something. Very similar to the metaphor that Mark enjoyed, which is it's a blank page. How are you going to fill it? But not just how are you going to fill it, how are you going to fill it with Torah and mitzvahs? Yes, Dave.
Quick question. So if you just focus on that, it seems to me, as I understand it as a real novice, is that every day should be celebrated. Like,
absolutely.
Yes, days, but every day we thank God for what we've got, for the opportunities to connect, with Him. And it always seemed to me, like when people say, my birthday is just another day. No, to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it should be celebrating every day, because every day is worthy of celebration of what God has given.
Absolutely. So I actually want to add a little something to what you're saying, which I think is the point that you're trying to make, which is I think it was the Radvaz. I can't remember. It was a great halachic authority that somebody once sent him a question from, and we have it documented in his literature. The answer that he gave to this question. Somebody once sent him a question from prison. He was told that the prison allows him one day a year that he can be free for that day. Obviously, he'll be monitored to one degree or another, but basically he can be released from prison and he can practice whatever he wants to practice for that day. Now, obviously, he's not practicing a Passover Seder in prison. He's not practicing Purim in prison. He's not fasting on Yom Kippur in prison, or maybe he's doing as best as he can. But he's asking this rabbi, which day is the most important day on the Jewish calendar, that should be the day that I should be released. Anybody want to hazard a guess which day he told him? What is the most important day on the Jewish calendar?
Shabbat.
Helene says Shabbat. Anybody else? Some of you are muted. Don't forget to unmute if you're going to chime in here.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Okay. Anybody else? Levi, you want to guess what he said? What do you think he said? Have you heard this one before?
Problem is that anybody know.
Oh, you know the answer. Okay.
Yes.
The answer is he told him today. You should have them release you today. Why? Because today is the most important day on the calendar. Hayom la'asotam. The pasuk cautions us. Today is the day to do the mitzvah. Don't push it off. Today is the most important day on the calendar. Having said that, obviously, each life cycle event is a moment to reflect and to make all the days from that day forward meaningful. So let's start off with the first part of life, and we're actually going to start before it, which is birth. And we're actually going to start really before birth, because it turns out that life starts before birth. From conception until birth is also a period of time. And the Talmud tells us something about that time. Mark, if you can read for us from the Talmud.
I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have your book yet.
That's okay. Elise, if you can read for us, please, on page 41, text 2a from the Talmud.
Okay, the fetus is taught the entire Torah. As it enters this world, an angel approaches and slaps it on the mouth and causes it to completely forget the entire Torah.
So some of you, thank you, Elise, some of you may have heard this before, that while the fetus is in utero, it is taught the entire Torah, and then right before it comes out, it forgets it. Some people say that's the little indent that we have above our lip is from that, because ba malach v'satri al piv. Okay, my question to you is, what's the point? What is the purpose of this? Why would you learn the entire Torah in utero? What's the purpose? If you're not going to remember it anyways, and when you come out, you're going to forget the whole thing, what's the purpose? So Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosheber Soloveitchik, I'm going to get to his whole background, has some very interesting insight into this, and it has a little something to do with what in English or in French we call déjà vu. Levi, you want to read for us, please? Text 2b. It's on page 41 still.
Every Jew comes into the world with a natural
Responsiveness.
responsiveness to Torah teaching. Every Jew begins with a shear in Torah that was vested in him before his birth, and though he is made to forget it, it is preserved in the deep recesses of his soul, waiting to be awakened by study and a favorable environment.
So if you've ever had this feeling throughout your life, where you hear something, you're like, that Torah thought resonates really deeply with me. I feel like I've heard it at some point, but I don't remember ever hearing this, and maybe that's even somehow impossible for you to have heard it because the person who's sharing it is saying, but somehow it's part of Torah, right? And the reason that that's the case is because the Torah wants you to have that feeling of comfort, that feeling of recognition, where somewhere deep down you've actually learned this before. You've always learned it before. And the truth is that doesn't just apply to the angels. The angels are teaching the fetus Torah, but what's going on around the fetus, meaning outside in the world, around the womb, also plays a big role. Let's take a look at text 3a. Who's here? Helene, you want to read for us? Text 3a on page 42.
I can't right now. Thank you.
That's okay. So where are we here? Okay, Dave, we're back to you. Text 3a.
Fortunate is the woman who gave birth to Rabbi
Yehoshua ben Hananiah.
Ben Hananiah.
The Mishnah is praising the mother of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah. Fortunate is she. Okay, all right. On the face of it, just seems like she's so lucky to be his mother, that sort of thing. But actually, the Talmud the Gaon of Vilna gives us some very deep insight into this. Dave, keep going. Text 3b.
Fortunate is she who gave birth to Rabbi Yehoshua, because from the time when she conceived, she did not budge from the study hall so that he could constantly hear words of Torah.
In other words, this is an ancient Jewish custom to be very careful. I mean, we should always be careful what we see with our eyes and what we hear with our ears, etc. But for a woman who is, you know how they say a woman is eating for two? Right? It turns out a woman is also experiencing for two. While she's expecting, she's also experiencing for two. If she watches something, if she sees something, if she looks at something, if she hears something, she has to be very careful because it actually has an impact on the baby. Obviously, this is from a health perspective. We all know she has to avoid drinking, she has to avoid smoking, which again she should avoid during her own life as well, especially in excess. But certainly when she has a baby in utero, she has to be careful because that's going to affect the baby. Spiritually speaking, the same thing works. A woman should be very careful which movies she watches, which music she listens to, which images she looks at, what she experiences, the language that she uses. Why? Because it all has an impact on this child. And this extends to the home that the child is in. The Rebbe would always encourage women that were expecting to make sure that their homes have a mezuzah on it. To make sure their homes, there's tzedakah being, she should give extra tzedakah while she's expecting. Why? Because all of these things affect the baby. Okay. Finally, the baby arrives on earth. Mazel tov. It's a baby, it's a boy, it's a girl, whatever it is. And the birth is a momentous occasion. Now, on a physical level, it marks the moment when the child becomes a fully separate human being, right? When it's in utero, as we know, through the umbilical cord and the placenta, it's getting its nurture. It's getting its sustenance from the mother. And now it's living on its own. Hooray, beautiful. What a moment to celebrate. But also from a spiritual perspective, there's something very big that's happening here. And that, of course, all has to do with the soul. At the moment of birth is the moment that the nefesh elokis, which you may have heard a lot about, the godly soul, which is literally a piece of God above, actually begins to come into the body. It starts at conception. At conception, God actually allocates which soul is going to be for this body, but then at birth, it actually joins with it. And this is why every single year, we should treat this day as a very, very big deal. Why? Think about it. This is the day that God decided that this soul, which was in the realm of souls, in Hebrew it's called the guf neshamot, right? In the body, it was part of the major body of souls. In other words, just God within God. And then it comes down and becomes a separate entity, and it gets paired up with the body because it has a mission here in this world. So let's say you're turning 36 this year, right? You should recognize that I have no idea how many years this soul is supposed to be connected to this body, but it turns out there's supposed to be a 36th year now. I'm in my 36th year of life. What am I going to do about this 36th year of life? How am I going to make it meaningful? And this is why there are lots of Jewish customs that are associated with a birthday. and you can follow along with me if you'd like on page 43 as we go through some of them. It's a day of reflection. How was my year? What was I doing on every day of the 12 months or 13 months of this year since my last birthday? And how am I going to make the next year better? It's also a good time as a continuation of that to take on a resolution, a new mitzvah you're going to do this year. Give some extra charity, make that day meaningful. Give some extra psalms to pray for yourself and for the year ahead. Add in prayer. Share this moment with other people so that you can actually, the people that are close to you in your life, it's not just celebrate together with them, reflect together with them. A farbrengen, a Hasidic gathering is meant for people to get together and actually reflect, oh, it's been another year. What's the next year going to be like? Another very interesting Jewish custom is to make a shehechiyanu on that day. Shehechiyanu, of course, is the blessing that we make on a new fruit or on a new piece of clothing, right? Or on some sort of new experience. Now, technically, we should make a shehechiyanu, blessing shehechiyanu v'kimanu v'gilonu l'zman hazeh. Thank you, God, for sustaining me for another year and bring me to this day. Technically, we should make that even just on the fact that it's a new year. Okay? There are halachic reasons why we don't do that, but what we do is we have a new fruit that we make a shehechiyanu on, and with that, we also have in mind, thank you, God, for the new year. And finally, for men, to get an aliyah to the Torah, again, there's a lot of spiritual significance to what happens when a neshama goes up to the Torah. It gets an elevation, and we want that elevation for our lives. And this is all summarized by the Ben Ish Chai, which is text 4 in our books on page 44. Elise, can you read it for us, please?
Okay. Which one?
Page 44, text 4.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hey, some people have a custom to annually celebrate their birthday in a festive manner. This is an auspicious custom, and such is the custom in our household.
Okay. By the way, I should mention this little factoid on page 44. Birthday holidays is very, very relevant to me. There are 2 days on the Jewish calendar, full holidays of the Jewish people, that are actually treated like birthdays. Rosh Hashanah, first of all, is a celebration of the birthday of Adam. And that's why we always say that a person's birthday is like their own mini Rosh Hashanah, because it's the beginning of their year. So that might be an interesting myth to bust for you. Maybe some of you think the Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the world, that it's the day the world was created. It's not. It's 6 days later, the day that Adam was created, on the 6th day of creation. But also Pesach, Passover, which as many of you know is my birthday, is my personal birthday. Pesach is called, in Ezekiel, it's called the day of our birth, the day we were born. It's the birth of the Jewish people as a nation. And for me, that's always very, very, very special and significant because it's also my personal birthday. Anyways, my point is that a lot of the customs, if you look at the customs of Rosh Hashanah or the customs of Pesach, some of the customs that we do on that day are because we're celebrating a birthday of some sort. Okay. All right. After the baby is born, it's time to give the baby a name. As we know, for a boy, this is traditionally done at a bris, at a circumcision. And for a girl, this is done at the Torah as soon as possible after the birth. A name is given. Now, it turns out that until the name is given, this person's soul is not fully connected with them. It turns out that a person's soul is directly connected with their name. Now, we'll get to more on that in just a moment, but I want to start off by talking about that the fact that there's a difference for a boy and a girl. For a boy, the name is given at circumcision. What is the uniqueness of circumcision? 8 days after a baby boy is born, they make a circumcision, but a circumcision is just an English word to describe the physical act that's done. A better English word, actually to translate the word bris, is covenant. The word bris means covenant. So how's that for another mythbuster for you? On the 8th day, we're not actually having a circumcision. That's a technical part of it. We're actually engaging in a covenant. We're engaging in a covenant whereby we're entering into a covenant with Hashem that we are going to follow His ways. Talk about the importance of a milestone being all about doing mitzvahs. That's what the whole day is supposed to be. This boy is entering into the covenant of Abraham with the covenant which started with Abraham, with the Almighty, that we're going to follow in His ways. Okay, so the $1 million question now is, why doesn't a woman need to have a bris? Does a woman not need to have this covenant with God? So it turns out, actually, spiritually speaking, when a girl is born, a Jewish girl is born, it's actually considered as if she's circumcised already. We don't mean the physical act. What we mean is this spiritual element of it. Let's see, text 5. The Talmud tells us, Isha kemande mehila damya. A woman is actually considered as if she's circumcised already. So this is why I say it's a myth to call a bris a circumcision. Why? Because the bris that we're talking about is actually the covenant that is formed with God. In the Torah, this word bris is used over and over again, usually for a covenant, most notably by the covenant of the hearts, and it says that Orle Lev, people that don't have a covenant with God, are called you should circumcise your hearts, the Torah tells us. What does it mean to circumcise your hearts? You should not have an uncircumcised, in other words, a heart that does not have a covenant with God. Now, the Talmud teaches that a Jewish woman is born without the obstruction to this covenant, which a male is born with an obstruction. Again, we're talking in spiritual terms here. The physical circumcision is a reflection of what's happening spiritually. Spiritually, a boy is born with an obstruction between him and this covenant that he has with God. And when we physically cut off a certain part of his body, we're also spiritually removing the obstruction from his heart to have this covenant with Hashem. So a girl is born, and this obstruction is already not present. Okay. Fun fact, on page 45, a circumcision never has invitations. If you've ever seen an invitation printed for a circumcision, you will notice that it does not say we would like to invite you. It says we are informing you, we are notifying you of the circumcision. Why is that? The reason for that is because it's such a spiritually powerful event where this boy is going to be brought into the covenant of Abraham that we don't want anybody turning it down, right? It's similar to an aliyah. There's a lot of discussion in halacha about when someone is called up to the Torah, you can't uncall him. You can't reverse the invitation to come up to the Torah. So let's say, for example, I'm the one calling people to the Torah, and I call up, I don't know, Levi, right? Yamayit, and I call him up to the Torah, and then he tells me, I can't, or maybe I realize I should have given somebody else the aliyah. It's too late. Why? Because it would be considered extremely disrespectful for Levi to say, no, thank you, no, I don't want to go up to the Torah. Similarly, a bris is the same thing. A bris is such a powerfully spiritual event that once you invite somebody to it, and could be technically they can't make it, and now they're going to be basically saying no thank you to this major spiritual elevation, right? So that's why we don't invite to the bris. Okay, now at the bris, or for a girl at her at the aliyah where they name the girl at the Torah, there's actually a special Ribono Shel Olam which we say. We say to Hashem, send your angel to give the soul to this baby. Why is that? Because when we give the name to the baby, that's when the baby's soul finishes or continues, so to speak, becomes continually attached to the body of this baby. Elise, if you can read for us, please, text 6, which is from Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe. Elise?
Okay. Before a soul enters the body, it has no name. The soul itself has no need for a name, nor does a lifeless body have any use for a name. Rather, the function of the name is to join the soul with the body. The vitalizing energy that emanates from the soul to give life to the body is rooted in the name.
Thank you. So you would think, like in the secular world, people give all sorts of random names, cute names, fantastical names that I would never give to a baby. From a Jewish perspective, a name is not a random thing. And in fact, as many of you know, Hasidim always turn to their Rebbe for advice, right? The one thing the Hasidim would never turn to their Rebbe for advice on is what to name their babies. In fact, the Rebbe always refused. If somebody did ask, what should I name my baby? The Rebbe would say, I'm not giving you a name. Why? Because it's so connected to the spiritual aspect of the baby, Hashem himself guides the parents on what they should name this baby. Dave, if you can read for us text 7 about this special divine spirit with which they name the baby. We're on page 47 here.
Yep. When a father or mother choose a name for their newborn child, the name is not random or arbitrary. Rather, God places in their mouth the name that is needed for that soul.
So they might be the ones physically choosing the name, and they might tell you, we're choosing the name because we want a name after this person, or because we want the name because it's significant, because it's connected to the day, or whatever it is. But if you've ever been to a bris, or to a few brises, you know that every once in a while there's these wild stories that happen at brises where they were planning to give one name and the last second they change it, etc. And a lot of this is connected with this spiritual intuition which is gifted to the parents to name the child. Okay, and with this we are going to conclude this section on bris and naming, on birth and bris and naming, and for boys and for girls, etc. I'd like to move on to perhaps a much lesser known mitzvah. That is the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben. 30 days after a baby boy is born, assuming that he meets certain criteria, the baby will have what's known as a Pidyon Haben, the redemption of the firstborn. before I give you the history of this, I want to explain to you the conditions that have to be met in order for this baby to have a pidyon haben, and why you might never have been to one because they're so rare. First of all, a pidyon haben is only done for males, only for boys. We'll talk more in a moment why it's not for girls. Number two, the baby has to be the first baby to exit the womb of the mother. So that means no stillborns, no miscarriages, no. And the baby has to come out naturally, not through a C-section. And the baby has to be born to two Israelite parents, which means not his father or his mother are from a Kohen or Levite family. If all of those things are met, such as, for example, in the case of the birth of my son Menachem, then you go on to a pidyon haben. The background of this mitzvah we're going to do via video. It's actually a video presentation that I prepared together with my wife in honor of Menachem's pidyon haben 7.5 years ago. So if some of you were there, please pardon the repetition. You may have seen the video then. Please turn your attention to the video screens. Bereshis bara Elokim eis hashamayim ve'eis ha'aretz. At the dawn of creation, God created man, and the Torah relates that God clothed him. Vayas Hashem Elokim le'adam u'le'ishtoi kosnes oir vayalbishem. And the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife shirts of skin, and he dressed them. The Medrash relates, in the Sefer Torah of Rabbi Meir, the word or was read with an aleph, meaning shirts of light. This refers to a special set of clothing worn only by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest in the holy temple. Adam was given these clothing because he was the firstborn of the world. Thus, the unique holiness of the Bechor was born. 2,248 years later, the Jewish people readied themselves to leave the land of Egypt. After over 200 years of harsh labor, they were being freed from bondage and ready to head to the Holy Land. But the final blow was yet to come. The plague of the firstborn, the Jewish firstborn by contrast, were spared. Vayehi ki hikshafare l'shalchenu, Vayareg Hashem kol b'choyer be'eretz Mitzrayim, mi b'choyer Adam, v'ad b'choyer behema, al kain, kol b'choyer bonai efte. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh was too stubborn to let us out, the Lord slew every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore, every firstborn of my sons I will redeem. On that day, another layer of holiness came over the firstborn, and a special mitzvah was born. Pidyon haben. This is the reason we are gathered here today, to witness the redeeming of a firstborn son as his parents purchase him for 5 silver coins from the hands of the Kohen, God's agent. This mitzvah also falls under a general category of firsts, all of which are consecrated for holiness. Teruma, the first grains of the crop. Bikurim, the first fruits of the trees. Reshis Hagez, the first shearing of wool. Chala, the first of the dough. Bechor Behema, the firstborn of your animals. Heter Chamor, the firstborn of your donkeys. And finally, Pidyon Haben, the firstborn of your sons. All these mitzvahs serve as a reminder that everything in this world belongs to God. When we consecrate our very first and very best, we are reminded that everything really belongs to our Creator, and that we must purchase it from Him before using it. So the purpose of the Pidyon Haben ceremony is to purchase back our children from the Kohen. In other words, to make them fully ours so that we can now give them back to God in terms of the way that they serve God with Torah and mitzvahs throughout their lives. Okay, we're going to continue now to bar and bat mitzvah. At the age of 12 or 13 years old, a Jewish child becomes a bar or bat mitzvah. For a boy, it's at 13 years old. For a girl, it's at 12 years old. And we'll talk shortly about why there's a difference between the two of them. But first, I have a question for the crowd. Do you need to have a bar mitzvah? Does a Jewish child need to have a bar mitzvah in order to be Jewish? Raise your hand, anybody? Good, I like the shaking of heads. Everybody's saying no. There is a misconception out there, clearly not on the people on this Zoom. There was a misconception out there that bar mitzvah, to be bar mitzvah, and how do I know about this misconception? Because it happens to me all the time. People come over to me, Rabbi, come to shul and I want to give them an aliyah to the Torah, or I want to put on tefillin, they're like, oh, but I was never bar mitzvah. And I'm like, what do you mean you were never bar mitzvah? I think unfortunately, lahavdil elef havdalas, this misconception comes from other religions where there's like a confirmation of sorts at a certain age, and unless you have that confirmation, you haven't really entered the religion, so to speak. That's not what bar mitzvah is. Bar mitzvah is not a confirmation. And if you didn't have a party, and even if you weren't called to the Torah and you didn't put on tefillin and you didn't do all the special things that you're supposed to do on the day of your bar mitzvah, you still are bar mitzvah at 13 years old. Or for a girl, you are bat mitzvah at 12 years old. It doesn't happen because you did something. Okay. So what is the bar mitzvah? Bar mitzvah is simply the age of maturity from a Jewish perspective, and we'll soon talk about not the age of maturity for everything. Doesn't mean Judaism believes we should be driving at 18 and buying cigarettes. We should be driving at 13 and buying cigarettes at 13 and drinking alcohol at 13 and all the other things that you need to be of legal age in this country, or 18 or 21, right? No, that's not the way it works. Those things might be for other ages. But in terms of your spiritual maturity, which is directly connected to your emotional maturity, that happens at the age of 12 and 13. So now we can turn to page 49. And let's ask Elise. Elise, as a woman, can you tell me why do you think that the spiritual and emotional age of maturity would be a year earlier for a woman than for a man?
Girls mature faster.
That's correct. It's simply because girls mature faster. And that's directly connected, as with everything. It's not just they physically mature faster, they emotionally mature younger. No, it's not just because of that. It's actually directly connected to the spiritual maturation which is happening within them. And just to share a brief insight about this, when Adam is created, right? So it says that originally Adam was created as an androgynous being. He was a male and a female within one, right? And then God decided He's going to split them up and make two, a male and a female, and bring them back together. So famously, Adam was sleeping, and God took off a side. People mistranslate it all the time as a rib. It was not necessarily a rib. According to most opinions, it was a full side of Adam, the female side that was taken off of him. And then it says, Vayiven esatzela, that God built this side of Adam out to be a woman. He built it. Such a strange word. Throughout creation, you don't find this word about anything else. It says that God spoke, most of the world was spoken into being, right? With regards to the soul of man, it says that God blew the soul into man. Only with regards to the woman does it say, Vayiven esatzela, He built the side out to be a man, to be a woman. And so the commentary are quick to point out that the word Vayiven shares the same etymological root as the word Bina. Okay, now Bina normally is translated as understanding, but Bina is this spiritual understanding, this spiritual intuition, which is given, the Talmud says, Bina yeseru noda asla. An extra spiritual sense is given to a girl, to a female soul, more than to a male soul. That's why their spiritual intuition is in general usually on a higher level than a male's. This ties into why certain mitzvahs are for them and certain mitzvahs are for men, etc. There's not a class about the differences between men and women, but if we did, that would be the starting point, and everything starts from there. And that's also why, fun fact, this is a class of fun facts. I'm allowed to say as many fun facts as I want. This is also why I was especially moved. Obviously, we gave my daughter my first daughter, the name Bina, which is that word that we just mentioned, Bina, right? We gave her that name because she's named for her grandmother, my father-in-law's mother, Rabbi Hanoka's mother, Rabbitzin Bina Hanoka. But it was especially meaningful for me. It was actually right around the same time as Parashat Bereshit, when we read that parsha in the Torah. Why? Because that is the spiritual, the definition of a woman from a Jewish perspective. The spiritual identity of what it means to be a woman is directly connected with the word Bina, or Bina Yeser Nodasla, which comes from when God creates the first woman. Okay, we're a little behind on time, so let's move along. After Bar and Bat Mitzvah, the next thing that happens is, we did this already. Oh, this is the verse I was talking about. And God built the side into a woman. This teaches that God endowed the woman with more understanding than the man. That's the reason for this earlier bat mitzvah before the bar mitzvah. And that's also why, by the way, it really offends me. I mean, usually anything to do with equality offends me. Anytime somebody wants to take a whole bunch of people that are each unique in the way that God created them and say we are all the same, that bothers me. Whatever it is. Whether it's Jews and non-Jews are all the same, people from different denominations are the same, or different genders are the same, that they're all the same, and to somehow equal the playing field. I never like that. but particularly this business of having b'nei mitzvah, which is that bar and bat mitzvah should happen at the same age, has always bothered me, because you're taking away the uniqueness and the unique identity of each individual with their particular individuality. Okay, leaving that alone. Let's move on to the next life cycle event, which for most people is usually marriage. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is arranged marriages. Raise your hand if you were in an arranged marriage. If you were set up with your spouse in an arranged marriage. Nobody? Okay. I should start off by just clarifying what I mean by an arranged marriage. I don't mean a matched marriage where two people are introduced to each other. That happens all the time in the Hasidic world for sure, but even outside the Hasidic world. But people all the time are introducing their friends to each other. That's a suggested marriage or a matched marriage, but not an arranged marriage. By an arranged marriage, what I mean is when two people marry each other just because two other people decided they should marry each other and they've never met each other and they get together and they marry that day. Actually, from a Jewish perspective, there's a little bit of an interesting paradox here. On the one hand, we are told that the person that you marry is predestined from above. Very similar to the name that is given to a child that's predestined, and it's a spiritual intuition that's given to the parents to give that name. Similarly, when two people meet, there's a spiritual providence that makes sure that these two people meet because they're supposed to marry each other. These two souls are supposed to come together. But at the same time, we say that it's predestined. You're not allowed to. It's forbidden, according to Torah law, to take part in an arranged marriage, to marry someone without meeting them. Dave, if you can read for us, please, text 9a.
A man may not betroth a woman whom he has not seen and for whom he has not approved.
So first of all, from the man's perspective, he has to make sure to see her. He cannot just choose around, hey dude, find me a wife, any wife is good, and then marry her and move on. No, he has to actually meet her beforehand, at the very least. Ideally, he should meet her more than once and more than just by peeking at her, right? But at the very least, he has to see her. In addition to this, text 9b, from the woman's perspective, Dave.
And they said, let us summon the maiden and ask her.
This is a verse from the Torah. From one of the first marriages that we're told about in the Torah, which is the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah, Yitzchak and Rivka. And it says that Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, was the first shliach, he was the first shadchan, the first matchmaker to go and make a match between Isaac and Rebekah. But when he goes to get Rebekah, the first thing they do is they make sure they have her consent. Says the Talmud, Rashi quotes the Talmud. Dave, keep going, text 9c.
We learn from this verse that a woman may only be married with her consent.
So there needs to be consent. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. Maybe perhaps a little bit of myth busting for somebody who might have thought that a marriage can actually take place, good old Fiddler on the Roof style, right? Where two people are just popped up together and these two people are going to marry each other. No, actually the marriage needs to be, the man needs to meet her beforehand, the woman needs to consent to getting married, and then they can get married. Okay. And then the marriage happens. Now, as anybody on this Zoom who is married knows, marriage is not logical. The joining of two people, any people, by the way, in a way that the Torah mentions, how much more so if it's in a way that the Torah mentions, that they should become like one flesh, is a very, very unnatural occurrence. It becomes multiplied many times over when the two people that are coming together are not just different personalities, but two completely separate, individualized individuals. Why? Because one is a man and one is a woman. One comes from Mars, one comes from Venus, right? Mars. There's a reason that the book has that title. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Why? Because it is essentially like bringing two different people from two different planets. Spiritually speaking, they're from two different planets. And you're bringing them together. You want them to become like one flesh. How can we ever expect a man and a woman to become one in marriage? Right? How can we ever expect this to be anything more than just a partnership where two people are tolerating each other? So the answer to this, today I'd like to suggest two answers to this, okay? And they both have to do with circles, all right? Or in Hebrew, the word is makif. Let me explain. Every human being's life is a little bit like a circle. Imagine inside this circle are all of the different components that make up your identity. So you have your intellect, the way you think about the world is part of that circle. Your emotion, the way that you feel about different things, the way things in this world make you feel, that's also part of your circle, right? The way you speak, the way you act, the way all of these things are all part of this circle. Within this circle is all of the experiences that you experience in life, right? But then there's something else. Would you say that what you think is who you are? No. Would you say that what you speak is who you are? No, certainly not. We lie all the time. right? People lie all the time, I should say. Would you say the things you do are who you are? No, certainly not. A person cannot be limited to their actions or to their feelings. We have feelings one day one way about another person, the next day another way about a person. If the way I feel reflects who I am, so does that mean that I'm schizophrenic? Every day I'm feeling a different way, every day I'm a different person? No. All of these things are aspects or reflections of a deeper core that is the real core of who we are. Who is that? That's what I would call the circle itself. The circle around all of these things is the core being, the essence of the human being. Okay? That's the circle, the etzem hanefesh, the essence of the soul, that all of these things are really offshoots of that essence of the soul. Okay. This means when you walk down the aisle and you're going to marry another human being, you cannot come saying, oh, I'm an intellectual, therefore and that's my core being, who I am as an intellectual, right? So therefore that has to match with the other person's intellect. There's a good chance that's not going to match. You cannot come with only your actions. You cannot come with only your feelings, with only the words that you speak, because all of those things are only details of who you are. If you can strip away all those things and reach down to the core of who you are, I'll feel a little differently. I'll think a little differently. But at the core of who am I? I'm a soul. If I can get that core, I can reach the core, that core part of my identity, at that core, it actually is possible for two human beings to come together. Especially in marriage. Why? Because at that core, all we are is a reflection of the divine. All we are is a godly soul. All we are is a soul. And at that, by the way, this is really the key foundation behind loving any other human being. Even just loving your fellow as yourself, that's an impossible statement to make unless you talk about it this way. What if I disagree with them? What if I feel differently about them, right? So the key is to get to the core component of who you are. How much more so in marriage, when two people are trying to become one flesh, they each have to reach the core of who they are, this circle that is the core, that everything else is within that circle, or everything else comes from that circle. They have to reach that stage in order for them to be able to come together. So that's the first answer we're going to give. The second answer is, hold on a second, we'll get to this in just a second. The second answer is that they have to bring in a third component. So you have two circles so far, right? Two circles, two people that have boiled themselves down to the core of who they are. And then you have to bring in a third higher component that they can both strive for. Usually we call this a goal, right? Something that is higher than both of them. That this partnership is going to strive in order to create. Think of any partnership that there is in life. Two of the most unpredictable partners that come together to form a business together. How are they forming it together, right? How are they both collaborating with each other when you would never see? In politics, this happens all the time, right? Why do two people from opposite sides of the aisle collaborate? Because there's a higher goal that they're trying to achieve, that they're uniting together against it. In Israel right now, right? There's a lot of politics going on. In Israel, many different fractions of the government disagree with Bibi Netanyahu and what his coalition is doing, right? But when it came post October 7th, or when it came with the attack on Iran, they formed a unity government. Why? Because everybody comes together for the sake of something higher. Similarly, in a marriage, they need to be, these two cores that are coming together and forming one flesh need to have a shared and common goal of something higher that they're trying to transcend themselves to connect with God. And only then will the marriage be successful. And of course, that is the godly element, the divine element in the marriage. The Torah tells us that there are three partners in a marriage. There's the man and the woman, and then there's God, which is the higher component that they're both trying to become one with. And only then can they become, they will become one in the marriage. This is why we find two interesting components in marriage. First of all, we find this repetition of circles in marriage, right? This is text 10a. But I'm just going to summarize it, okay? According to Jewish tradition, when the bride and groom come under the chuppah, the first thing that happens is the bride makes circles around the husband. Why? Because we're referencing this idea of the circle of the etzem hanefesh, of the core of her soul. And then from the flip side, the man takes a circular object, a ring, and puts it on her finger again, representing him coming with his circle, his core of of his soul. And then finally, that's text 10a, and then to summarize text 10b, there's another element of the wedding, which is the chuppah. All right, the chuppah, you can see one here in the picture, another one here. The chuppah is supposed to represent the thing that is higher than both of them, that they are striving to bring into their marriage, namely God, this makif that surrounds both of them. Okay. So and now we're going to be ready to move on to the next life cycle event, which is having children. But before we talk about having children, hold on a second. This is a little out of my slides were a little out of order. I want to add one more element to. Yeah, okay, I see why they're out of order. Okay, I want to add one more element to marriage, and that is that a marriage of two Jews is actually supposed to reflect a much greater marriage that they are making. There's a macro marriage that they are creating a microcosm of that macro marriage, and that is the marriage between God and the Jewish people. When did that marriage happen? We're in the middle of that marriage now. We know that, right? Hopefully, there's no divorce coming, right? Unlike what some people think that there was a New Testament, there was a divorce. God divorced the Jewish people, started again. No, we're in a marriage for life with God. And that marriage started at Mount Sinai when God gave us the Torah. And this is why we find a lot of parallels between the way the Jews celebrate a marriage and the original marriage between God and the Jewish people with the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Let's go through some of them. If you'd like to follow with me, we're on page 58 in the textbook, or you can take a look at the video screen. There is a Jewish wedding tradition that there should be a matchmaker. Okay, two people meet, but there should be somebody that's the official introducer of these two people, a shadchan, right? Just like the original match between God and the Jewish people, Moses was a matchmaker. There is another Jewish custom, which is that the wedding, obviously sometimes doesn't work out, but in an ideal situation, you should try your best. The wedding should be in the bride's hometown, on her home turf. Why is that? Because in the marriage between God and the Jewish people, God is the groom and we are the bride. And God, it says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, God came down to this earth to give us the Torah, to marry us. So similarly, in our marriages, we try to make sure that the groom comes to the bride in order to marry the bride, not vice versa. The next thing is, when it comes to the chuppah, the bride and the groom each have escorts. And when the escorts are escorting the bride and the groom each with what they're doing under the chuppah, they come holding candles. Why do they come holding candles? Because we don't know how to control lightning. So we can't create lightning for each chuppah, for every single wedding. But at the original wedding, at the macro wedding between God and the Jewish people, there was lightning. Famously, there was lightning at Mount Sinai. So therefore, we also try to have candles representative of the lightning that there was at Mount Sinai. Finally, there's breaking the glass, which I'm sure many of you have heard one of the reasons that we break a glass under the chuppah, which is to remember the destruction of Jerusalem. But another reason actually is because Moses broke the tablets. At that marriage, there were ups and downs, and part of the issues that there were during that marriage was the breaking of the tablets with the sin of the golden calf, etc. So we want that also to be part of our marriage, a representative of the ups and the downs that there are going to be throughout the marriage. And finally, even with the celebration, at the celebration of the marriage, I'm sorry, not finally, it's the second to last one. At the celebration of the marriage, there are somersaults that are done. If you've ever been to a Jewish wedding, you'll see that during the dancing, people are making somersaults, going upside down, etc. Why? Because just like at the giving of the Torah, it says that when the Torah was given, it says that which was up came down, and that which was down went up. What does that mean? God, which is usually up in the heavens, so to speak, in the spiritual world, came down to the physical world, and the human beings were elevated, particularly through Moses. That Moses went up to Mount Sinai for 40 days, 40 nights. He went from the physical to the spiritual. What was up came down. What was down came up. This is why they were able to see what was heard and hear what was seen. Right? It was a crazy upside down world. So therefore, in our weddings, we also make somersaults to reflect this upside downness. And finally, we use a ring. Why do we use a ring? A ring represents infinity. The most infinite thing that Jewish people have that we can is the Torah. And God betrothed us with the Torah. So therefore, we betroth our women. In other words, in our marriages, the man betroths the woman with something that is round, representative of the infinity of Torah, the infinite aspect of the Torah. Okay. We're a little out of order here, but let's do text 14 on page 89, on page 59. Levi, if you can read it for us, please. The reason I want to read this is because I think it'll tell you something about the importance with which the Torah treats this relationship. When two people get married, it's not just about them finishing their relationship, it's actually about the whole year. Go ahead, Levi.
When a man weds a new wife, he shall not go out to the army, nor shall he be conscripted to any war effort. He shall remain free to attend to his home for 1 year and delight his wife who he has taken.
This in Hebrew is called Shana Rishona. The first year of marriage, a man is not allowed, for example, he's not allowed to go on extended trips without his wife. If he's going on an extended trip, and it's a business trip, and his wife has no interest in being there, she has to go with him. Either he should find a way not to take it, or she should go with him, and they find a way to make it also enjoyable. right? It shouldn't just be a business trip, it should also be a pleasure trip. The first year, the man does not go to war. If there's a war happening, the Jewish people need to be defended. The man does not go to war, not if he got married within the first year. And lots of other laws like this besides, that the first year is supposed to be, the theme of the first year is supposed to be about building this relationship. It starts in one day with marriage, right? Okay, I get it. And beforehand, they courted each other, etc. But now, it's time to build this relationship, and the foundation that is built is within that first year. Okay. Let's pretend like the slide for having children comes now, all right? So next comes continuing the cycle of life. Now, before we talk about continuing the cycle of life, we're on page 60 in your textbooks. Before we talk about continuing the cycle of life, we have to talk about, we have to summarize where we're holding now. Why? Because at this point, both the boy and the girl that were born many, many years ago finally have reached their completion in terms of the level of their soul. Let's explain. So far we've said that at birth the soul comes in, and at the Brit, or the naming, that's the time that the soul kind of fully fuses with the body, if you will. Okay, Brit and the naming. Then comes the Bar and Bat Mitzvah. That's the completion. It has fully matured into a full soul. Each one of them has a full half soul. But then with marriage, what happens? They come together. The two halves of the soul are united. And now they're ready to undertake. Now they are ready to undertake mitzvot and to fulfill their mission in this world. That's not to say the mitzvot they did before didn't count. Single people can do mitzvot too, but they're still not complete. Until a human being marries another human being, they have not completed their life. They haven't reached their full potential. What they can do, to give you just one simple symptom of this, the man can only do male mitzvot and the female can only do female mitzvot. But then they come together, and now they've, so to speak, graduated. And now it's time for them to use that graduation to go out and make their own impact on the world. And this is with many, many mitzvot. They're going to build a physical home, and a physical home comes with many mitzvot, a mezuzah on the door, and all the different mitzvot that there are associated with living life. But most notably, this is reflected in the mitzvah of having children. Okay? Okay, yeah, so this is the same thing as what we just went through. Okay. And we're jumping the gun here. The slides are a little out of order, so that's why I was jumping the gun there. So let's focus now on page 60 on this activity of having children. So let's start off with the following learning activity on number 3 on page 59. True or false? Only men are required to endeavor to marry and procreate. Women are absolved from these obligations. What do you think, Dave? Is that true or false? Only men need to have children, not women. He's confused by the very question. He's like, I don't see how men are having children on their own. He doesn't see how this is happening.
I guess I'd say false. I don't know, but that
Right.
I find that strange.
Find it strange, yeah. Mark, what about you? Do you think women are obligated to have children from the Torah, or only men?
No, yeah, the women should too.
The women should also have children. Okay. And
Sure.
I love how you guys are all going along with my ridiculous question, like as if women can have children on their own and men can have children on their own. We need them both to have children, right? But we're doing a thought experiment here. It turns out, what was that, Elise? What do you think?
I read ahead. It's the men. Only
Right.
the men are
It
obligated.
turns out, in one of the strangest things ever, the Torah obligates men to have children, does not obligate women to have children. And I'm gonna do my best to explain this. I might put my foot in my mouth. I'm gonna try to do my best to explain this, and hopefully you'll all be with me. This does not mean that women do not get a mitzvah for having children. Women do have a mitzvah for having children, but they do not have an obligation to have children. Let's read this obligation in the Torah. Elise, you read ahead, so why don't you read for us? Text 15a.
A man is commanded to procreate, not so a woman.
This seems very, very strange. Why would the chiyuv, why would the obligation or the commandment to have children be specifically on a man? It seems to be so related with the woman. So actually, that itself might be the answer. Elise, text 15b.
Okay.
We're on page 60.
God's statutes and ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its pathways are peaceable. Pregnancy and birth entail a degree of mortal danger for women. As the sages said regarding childbirth, death is common. Hence, since the Torah does not burden us with directives that the body can not reasonably tolerate, the Torah only obligates men to procreate and absolves women from this mitzvah.
Okay, pause. Let me interject here for just a moment. So that's the first answer. The first answer is like this. It's true. Really, the mitzvah should be an obligation that is given to women. But the Torah, which we say every time we lift the Torah, we say, the Torah is its ways are ways of peace. And therefore, the Torah would never give us a commandment that is harmful to us. And as a result, even though the woman also has a mitzvah when she has a child, the Torah doesn't want to actively command the woman to have children because that would be actively commanding her to put her life in danger. And so therefore, there is no such commandment. Okay, a second reason, Elise.
In order then to ensure the perpetuation of the species, God created women with a powerful desire to have children, more so than men. So we find that Rachel told Jacob, "Give me children, otherwise I am as if dead."
So this is the second reason, which is that there's no need to tell women to have children because they naturally want to do so. And this is a very, very interesting factor. So the Torah doesn't want to command women to have children because that would be commanding them to do something that's painful, right? And then they would learn to resent the Torah. Do we really want women to resent the Torah? The Torah wants to have children. Torah wants to have children. There's no obligation on women to have children. So therefore, they will not resent the mitzvah. Instead, what does Hashem do? Instead of me commanding you to do something which is painful to you, I'm going to embed within the very woman herself the affinity, the attraction to having children. And this is why we find one of the strangest phenomena in this world. One of the most painful, and or at least so I'm told, one of the most painful and awkward and difficult things for a woman to do in her life is to have children. And yet, almost every woman that I've met has a strong desire to have children. There are times that it's more, times that it's less, but they have a strong desire to have children and to nurture those children, to raise those children. Isn't that interesting? That flies in the face of everything else that we know about human nature. Most human nature is, if fire is dangerous, God makes it that I don't want to touch fire. I touch it, it's painful, I don't want to touch it again. In fact, I always say as a parent, the best thing you can do for your child is if you see them about to make a mistake that's just going to hurt them just slightly, but not really do anything dangerous to them, let them do it. Why? Because then they'll never do it again. Like, for example, I often will put down food that is very, very hot in front of Leia. She's 1 year old. And at this point, she knows already. I tell her, says, hey, in Yiddish, I told her, it's hot. She touches it once with her finger. She doesn't touch it again. She's not an idiot. She doesn't like something that's painful for her. So therefore, she's not going to engage in that kind of behavior, right? Much better than me telling her you're not allowed to touch hot food. Like she shouldn't be doing that because I tell her it's not a good thing to touch hot food. She should be avoiding doing it because it's dangerous for her, right? The only exception to that rule, so again, to summarize, normally God creates people that if there's something that is dangerous for them, if there's something that's difficult for them, if there's something that's painful for them, they don't want to engage in that kind of behavior. The one exception that I can think of to that rule is that it is when it comes to women that they want to have children, even though it's an extremely painful, extremely uncomfortable, and extremely difficult thing to do. And so I think this tells us something very interesting about the Torah, that the Torah always wants to find a way to be peaceful with us, to be good for our lives. And I think this is just one symptom that in which this plays out.
So how does that reconcile with fasting for Yom Kippur? I mean, clearly that's not enjoyable. So that could be harmful if someone has other issues. I mean, that there seems to be some of a paradox there.
You're saying when we fast on Yom Kippur, we're paying ourselves.
We're told to fast, so that's something that's not a healthy thing to do. I mean, fasting leads to death.
Well, I think I'd like to answer your question. I think it's a great question. I'd like to just expand your question first. Can I do that? Can I apply it to more scenarios? Right?
Of course.
Why don't we ask a simpler question? How does that apply to not eating cheeseburgers? How does that apply to not eating, pork? From my understanding, pork and bacon, these are some of the most delicious things to eat, right? Not that anybody on this Zoom would know, or anybody watching this video. No, you guys have never engaged in this kind of behavior. But in theory, if somebody, I've been told by many people that it tastes delicious by non-Jews, right? So why would the Torah prohibit it from us? The answer is the Torah is not stopping us from, is not going to prohibit things from us that we're going to always appreciate why they're good for us. But the Torah will prohibit them for us if it's spiritually detrimental to us. So for example, in the case of fasting on Yom Kippur, it's true that the fasting is a little bit uncomfortable, right? But it's actually simultaneously doing something amazing for us. It's putting us in a state of teshuvah. It's putting us in a state where we can connect to God on a much higher level. We're supposed to represent angels and all the reasons that are given for why we fast and why we do all these things on Yom Kippur. So it might be physically a little bit painful for us, but spiritually it's very beneficial for us. Similarly, the same thing with kosher or non-kosher or anything else like that. So does that make sense?
How is that
So
different than childbirth?
one second. So it is the best thing for you. You just might not appreciate it in the way that you're doing it.
So why wouldn't that analogy go with childbirth? Like it seems you could use the exact same argument for having a child.
Good question. In my head, it makes sense. Let me try and explain it to you. When it comes to childbirth, the pain that is associated with childbirth is not the meaningful thing. I don't think that the pain itself, that God wants us to undergo the pain. For example, here's one example of it. Today, there's something called an epidural, right? Which can very much lower the pain of having, or any sort of anesthetic or whatever. There's lots of different things that people use, right, to lower the pain. I don't think Judaism allows all those things. Why? Because it's not a mitzvah to undergo the pain, right? The benefit of it comes from later. Whereas when it comes to fasting on Yom Kippur, eating on Yom Kippur itself is detrimental for you. So the Torah is telling you not to, because in itself is harmful to you. The same thing with eating non-kosher. The eating non-kosher itself is detrimental to you. So to you, it might seem physically like it's uncomfortable, but actually in itself is good. Whereas when it comes to childbirth, having the children is a good thing. But the pain that's associated with the children, which if the Torah actively commanded a woman to have children, the Torah would actively be commanding her to have pain, and that pain itself is not a good thing. That pain itself is actually, we're told it's a repentance for the sin of the tree of knowledge, etc., whatever, without getting into all details of why childbirth is painful. It's a whole different discussion we can have. But just to clarify the point, but when it comes to childbirth, you could separate the 2 points, and that's even today, some of it can even be mitigated, the pain. Does that make sense to you, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, so I hope that clarifies a little bit. I also want to clarify that this answer that I gave you to your question is just based on my understanding of it. I didn't see this anywhere. We've read the texts that I wanted to support my points, but in order to help differentiate between these different points, I hope that my explanation does so for you. Okay.
Makes sense.
Enough about childbirth. Now it's time to move on to the final life cycle, and that is death and bereavement. Now, before we start this conversation, I want to start off with a shameless plug. And that is as follows. We only have 15 minutes left to our class. And in those 15 minutes, we're going to talk about some very fun facts or fascinating facts and interesting tidbits and factoids, a myth and busting some myths, as we tend to do in this class when it comes to death and bereavement. However, on July 27th at the Pasadena Jewish Academy, we are going to be hosting a morning of lectures that is dedicated to this topic. And if you are over the age of 40, so Levi, that excludes you, but everybody else, you should make a point of attending this lecture. Why? Because there never comes a day when you're ready to talk about death and when you're ready to talk about what the Jewish view on it is in a very practical way. So attending this lecture will be very, very beneficial to you. And if you're 40 years old, or even if you're 70 years old, but Baruch Hashem, you're healthy and you're hoping to live another 20, 30, 40 years, Gesundheit, that's beautiful, that's wonderful, but still come to the lecture and come and take notes, and then when the time comes and it'll be relevant, you'll take care of it. The lecture is titled From Life to Life, and it's basically an informative morning of seminars and lectures on planning for our future. You could already go on the website and RSVP if you'd like. The link is here, pasadenajewishacademy.com/life. It's going to be from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. And there's going to be 6 different presenters. I will be presenting on the spiritual aspect, what happens spiritually when the soul leaves the body, which we're going to touch on a little bit now, but much more then. Rabbi Hanok will be touching on the halachic element. Also, we're going to be touching a little bit on it now, the different halachic ways that we bury our dead and that we go about our funerals, etc. Rabbi Eliezri will be talking about a Jewish legacy, the importance of making sure that our wills, our last will and testament, doesn't just reflect taking care of our loved ones, but also reflects making an impact on the world, and the opportunity to partner with Chabad in doing that and leaving a legacy to Chabad. Then we'll break for brunch in the Rab Club. Then we'll hear from a certified specialist in estate planning, a lawyer, Mr. Phil Reutman, who many of you know from attending these courses. He's going to talk about estate planning. And finally, Rabbi Yossi Manella, who's a funeral director and a member of the Chevra Kadisha, which is those that deal with the Tahara and the funeral arrangements from a Jewish perspective. He will talk to us about some of the costs behind it, what you can anticipate, etc. In other words, it's going to be a very practically oriented day so that you understand what death is like from a Jewish perspective, and you can also plan for it in a practical way to make sure that there's no surprises and everything is well taken care of. So just want to say that before we get started. Now, I'd like to open our conversation about death and bereavement with a quote from the Talmud. Okay, the Talmud tells us, text 16a. This is on page 62. Levi, if we can ask you to read for us, please.
One One who was present at the time of a person's passing is required to rend his clothing. This is because a person's passing is likened to the burning of a Torah scroll.
Okay. Now, even though this quote from the Talmud does not end up getting reflected in halacha, it's not the our custom today to tear our clothing if we're present when somebody dies. Why? Because since in the beginning that was the intention, but because people were avoiding going to people's deathbed because they didn't want to be present when somebody dies, right? Imagine if every doctor had to be worried that anytime they're present when somebody dies, or any rabbi, right, used to be worried, you're going to ruin your best suit, right? So people were avoiding hanging out with those that were about to die, which is a terrible thing. We want them to be surrounded by family and loved ones, and those that can care for them, and the clergy members, etc., right? So therefore, they said that we still do this custom, but actually we don't do it from witnessing it, but we do it at the funeral. Okay, we'll talk about that. And it's not everyone; it's only the loved ones. Okay, but the main point that I want to take away from this text that Levi just read for us is the parallel that the Talmud draws between the death of a or the departing of a soul from a Jewish body and a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll that is being burned. What is the connection here? So Levi, keep reading for us. Text 16b comes from the Ritva, and he is quoting Nachmanides. Yeah.
Nachmanides of blessed memory explains that the soul in the body is like the parchment of a Torah scroll that is inscribed with God's name.
This is a fascinating concept. Okay, let's talk about this. Parchment, right? The hide of an animal is not a holy thing. It's never a holy thing. It's just the hide of an animal. You can work it at the parchment. It's still not a holy thing. What is holy? Right? What's holy is the words of the Torah. Okay, but then we find a fascinating concept. If you take these words of the Torah and you inscribe them on a Torah scroll, you inscribe them on the hide of an animal, and you create out of that a Torah scroll, all of a sudden it becomes holy. And it doesn't just become holy because the words are on it. If the words end up being erased from the Torah scroll, the parchment is still holy. This is a very, very good analog for, this is a very good analogy for the body and the soul. A body is just a lump of flesh with bones and sinews and ligaments. That's it. That's what a body is, right? But then a soul comes. We spoke about it at the beginning of today's class when we spoke about the soul entering the body. And when the soul enters the body, they become now a full, holy human being. True, the soul is the holy part, but the body is the conduit through which that soul expresses itself, just like the parchment is the conduit through which the, through which the Torah, the words of the Torah are expressed. And that's why a soul departing a body is likened to a Torah scroll being burned. Okay, let's see text 16, and this results in a lot of things. Let's see text 16c. Dave, if you can read for us, please. Page 63.
All those who handle the dead must be aware that they are involved in a holy entity. The human body is not only the container that served the exalted soul, but has itself become sanctified with an independent holiness, similar to a Torah scroll.
So the Gesher HaChaim, thank you, Dave, is pointing out to us that when the holiness leaves the body, so let's say, for example, the letters leave the scroll, or the soul leaves the body, it retains that holiness. The body retains that holiness. Why? Because it was a conduit. Because it was a receptacle for such holiness, and it was a way for that. It was a medium is the word I'm looking for which the soul can interact with the world. So therefore, the body now has a holiness as well. And just like a Torah scroll needs to be buried, so too does a body need to be buried. Okay, now let's pause for a second because I just want to explain the picture on the slide. I think it's very, very important. The picture that you're watching here on the slide is from the year 1903. In 1903, in the city of Kishinev, there was a pogrom. And there were many things that happened in that pogrom. People died, people were harmed, people were injured, etc. But another thing that happened was they destroyed a lot of Torah scrolls. And this picture is actually from the ceremony of the burying of the Torah scrolls that were ripped and torn and obviously beyond repair, otherwise they would have repaired them, of the Torah scrolls from the city of Kishinev. I think it's such a moving picture and really drives home this idea of the fact that a human being is like a Torah scroll. Okay. Now, when a human being passes away, text 17a, Meis Be'ir, when a person dies, all the inhabitants of the city are forbidden to work. Whoa. Now, this is, you're going to see in a moment, this is not practically the way it works. But I guess the reason I'm bringing this from Shulchan Aruch, from the Jewish code of law, because this is inscribed in Jewish law. The reason I'm bringing this is because you should know that if anybody in any Jewish person in Pasadena dies, we all are technically not allowed to go to work that day. Right? Now, why practically doesn't it work that way? The reason that halacha doesn't work that way is because of text 17b. Mark, you have your textbook?
No, I don't. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. So Elise, if you can read for us, please, text 17b.
When a person dies, all the inhabitants of the city are forbidden to work.
And keep going, text 17b.
If there are ships in the city, with every ship tending to the dead on its designated day, then on their off days, the members of the other ships may work, even if there is a deceased person that needs to be cared for.
Okay, so basically, we get off on a technicality. We're allowed to work on the day that a Jew in Pasadena dies because there is something called the Chevra Kadisha in the city of, not Pasadena, but the greater Los Angeles area, which the whole LA County basically has a few Chevra Kadishas, these shifts of people that every day there's different people on shift that if anyone dies that day, they take care of the tahara, the cleansing of the body going to the mikvah, all the different things need to happen to the body before it is buried, and then they take care of the burials. Okay, now, they have to learn a whole set of laws. They have to learn basically how to deal with holy letters that are detached from a body. Hold that thought. They have to learn how to properly care for a body which now no longer has a soul in it, but still has the holiness of having been the receptacle or the medium through which this soul interacted with the world. So what are some of those laws? Some of those laws are, you're not supposed to engage in idle conversation in the presence of a dead body. You're always supposed to keep the body covered. If you're going to have any sort of conversation, it has to be either directly relevant to it or prayers. Praying, saying Tehillim, right? And we'll soon talk about the custom to actually make sure that the body is never alone. Okay? Let's talk about the tahara. So when the tahara happens, tahara means that the Chevra Kadisha washes the body and immerses it in the mikveh, etc. During that time, only men take care of male bodies, women take care of female bodies. And during the tahara, the private parts are covered the entire time, except for when they have to actually wash those parts. But besides that, out of respect for the body, right? The body, which as you can imagine, sometimes practically you have to turn the body over, the body is never placed face down. The entire time, the body is always sitting, lying on its back. It's never placed face down. That's considered disrespectful. And there's more. Let's take a look at text 18. Dave?
We
The body
maintain
is never left alone. We maintain a watch.
Yeah, we maintain a watch over the dead out of respect. Or if we were to leave the body alone, it would appear as if we abandoned it like a utensil that is no longer desired.
Right? Imagine what is the message that we're sending, even if it's just for 5 minutes. The body is there and we're going to bury it in a moment, but right now I got to go take an important phone call. The message you're sending is, this body doesn't really matter anymore. There's no soul in it anymore. And that's simply not true. It's a holy thing. And there's a holy obligation with it to make sure that we dispose of it properly and we bury it in the ground. Believe it or not, that obligation applies to every single part of the body. So for example, if someone has to have a certain part of their body amputated, that piece of the body needs to be buried. If there's a stillborn, that stillborn needs to be buried. A body is considered a holy, any element, any part of a body is considered a holy part of the body and therefore needs to be buried in the ground as per Jewish law. That's what text 19 tells us. Elise, text 19?
Man was created in God's image, just as there is no difference between a complete Torah scroll and one letter from the Torah scroll, as most best be treated with utmost respect. It is forbidden to accord disrespect to even a single bone from sacred bodies that were created in God's image.
One of the most heart-wrenching jobs that there is in Israel these days is by an organization called Zaka. And they are tasked with going to the scenes of terrorist attacks. In America, there's a much smaller organization that's tasked with going to the scene of a Jew who was in a car accident. But essentially, their job is to make sure that every single ounce of blood, that every single ligament, and if there were a bomb explosion and it's all over the house, unfortunately, heaven forbid, right? Lo yaleinu, they have to make sure as much of that as possible is brought to a Jewish burial. Why? Because we, as Jews, we respect the dead. Okay. And again, just to summarize, all of this has to do with the holiness of the body being compared to a Torah scroll. Levi, if you can drive this home for us with text 20a, which is a story from one of the 10 martyrs that we read about on Yom Kippur.
It is related in the Talmud that the students of Rabbi Hanania ben Trajan asked, What do you see? And he responded, the parchment is burning and the letters are flying up in the air. The physical parchment burned, and the letters, which are spiritual, flew up to heaven. A person, too, is compared of matter and spirit. When a person dies, only the corporeal body dies, while the soul ascends to the place it originally inhabited.
Okay. Now, one of the things you will never hear a rabbi or anybody talking from Jewish background, one word that you will never hear someone use about the deceased is the word lost. Right? You ever hear the term those we have lost? Right? Lost implies that I'm sorry, actually, we could use the term lost. I'm sorry. You will hear them use the word lost. You will never hear them use the word gone. That was the statement I'm trying to make. Why? Because gone implies that the item is no longer in existence. And you can be forgiven for thinking that, because when you see a body, it's lifeless. The soul has gone. It's gone. It's left, right? And we're burying the body in the ground. It seems like that chapter is over. But the truth is that a much better word to use, and a word that you will see all the time used by rabbis and throughout Jewish literature, is the term lost. Why is that? Dave, if you can read for us, please, text 20b.
When a righteous person is lost, he is lost to his generation. This can be compared to a person who lost a diamond. The diamond is lost to its owner, yet the diamond, wherever it may be, remains a diamond.
So the soul is still in existence. And if you tap into that soul, you can actually be in touch with that soul even from here in this world, by visiting the gravesite, by saying Kaddish, by doing all sorts of special things. And that's the last element of our lesson today. We're going to talk about yard site, which is some of the customs that we do at a yard site. And it starts not just with a yard site, of course. It starts with bereavement, right? It starts with the day of the passing, the 7 days of Shiva, right? On page 67, you can see the approach that we have when we go to comfort someone. Obviously, there's lots of words that we can say when we go to visit those that are in mourning over a loved one that they've lost. Right? You can say whichever words you want in order to comfort them. But there's a liturgy that we say which goes like this: Hamakom yenachem eschem. May God comfort you among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. We're telling them, yes, you are mourning. Right? But just like we are all mourning, first of all, your mourning is not alone. We're all mourning. None of us like the fact that we're in Galus. None of us like the fact that we're in exile. And we are all mourning with you. Right? And then we're not mourning for something that is gone. We are mourning for something that is lost. Just like with the temple in Jerusalem. Jews wake up every single morning with a fervent belief. Ani ma'amin, I believe that the temple is lost, not gone. The temple will come back. And even while it's not physically, but even when the third temple has not been rebuilt, and physically there's no temple on this earth, the temple is not gone, it's only lost. As we'll soon read in text 21b. Elise, I'll ask you to read it in just a second. We are telling the mourners that this is the case also with you. You should know that your loved one is not gone, your loved one is only lost. I just want to set up text 21b before Elise reads it. This text is an excerpt from a letter of condolence. It was written by the Rebbe to Arik Sharon. Anybody know who he was, right? He was a former prime minister of Israel. This was before he was prime minister. This was right after he had been a general. He was probably still a high-ranking general. He was a general famously in the 6-Day War. I think he fought in Egypt. And when a year after the 6-Day War, I think it was 1968, that this letter was written, the Rebbe writes to him, comforting him for the passing of his son. He had a son whose name was Gur, and his son and a friend were involved in a rifle accident, and his son was shot to death. It was friendly fire. It was a horrible, tragic accident, and the Rebbe writes this letter of comfort to him. Elise, when you're ready, text 21b.
Okay, may God comfort you among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem.
No, 21b.
Okay. Even in such a great tragedy, the modicum of solace, and even more than a modicum, is expressed in our traditional text of consolation to mourners. May the Almighty comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. The Romans and the Babylonians before them were able to destroy the holy temple of wood and stone, of gold and silver, but no nation can lay a hand on the inner holy temple in the heart of every Jew, for it is eternal. The same applies to every personal loss. The hand of death can only touch the body and its concerns, but the soul is eternal. It has simply ascended to the world of truth.
And this is why we have all sorts of customs where we actually stay in touch, if you will, with the soul, even after it has departed from this earth. There are lots of customs. I'm not going to go through all of them now, but there are lots of customs that Jews have to remember their loved ones on their yard site, on the anniversary of the day of their passing. We say Kaddish, of course. We light a candle. We do mitzvahs in their honor. We donate classes or things in their memory. Why? All of these things are to continue the relationship that we have with that person while they were a soul in a physical body, to continue that relationship even as they are souls without a body. There are a lot of customs. I'm not going to go through all of them now, but if you have loved ones that you every year like to commemorate their yard site, or if you don't yet and you'd like to start, if you go to chabadpasadena.com/yahrzeit, and you put in, this is completely free of charge, and you put in the information, in other words, the date of passing and the name, etc., for your loved one, we will send you a box like the one pictured on the screen in front of you, for the yard site of your mother, of your father, of your loved one, whoever it is, to help you commemorate the yard site. Of course, it will include a yard site candle. It will include a booklet that has all the appropriate prayers and customs that we do on a yard site. It will include a card that has different opportunities of different mitzvahs that you can do in their memory or in their stead. And I encourage every one of you, if there's something you want to take away from this lesson today, this can be something you can take away to commemorate the yard sites of our loved ones that are not gone, only lost. We'll conclude with text 21c. Dave, we'll ask you to bring it home for us. Text 21c, which is from that same letter that the Rebbe wrote, where the Rebbe ends off reminding Arik Sharon that actually there's going to come a time when we will be reunited with our loved ones. Go ahead.
We have perfect confidence that God will rebuild the ruins of Zion and Jerusalem. He will gather the dispersed remnants of Israel from the ends of the earth through our righteous Messiah, and he will bring them in gladness to witness the joy of Zion and Jerusalem. He was equally confident that God will fulfill his promise that those that dwell in the dust shall awake and rejoice. Isaiah 26:19. Great indeed will be the happiness and rejoicing then when all will meet together after the revival of the dead.
May it be speedily in our days. Amen. With this, we will conclude our second lesson of our 6-week journey, Fascinating Facts. This has been Sunrise, Sunset, and I look forward to seeing you all next week for lesson number 3, which is titled Under the Influence, when we are going to talk about angels, blessings, and evil eyes. See you all then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.